Hello there. It's 3 o'clock on a Tuesday, which of course means another riveting live stream of Behind Breaking Bond. Hi, I'm Randy Wallace with Fox 26. You are.
I'm Andy Kahn, Director of Victim Services, Crime Stoppers of Houston. I'm sorry, we actually started on time. Look at this.
I know.
It's 3 o'clock. I was expecting, the usual stuff. So I ice skated in here, got my skates, got my hat, scarf, gloves, mittens.
Do you like the cold weather?
I grew up in upstate New York, dude.
Yeah, so you're.
I've seen enough snow and shoveled it to last a
lifetime.
I hate the cold weather.
Yeah.
I don't have any problems with the heat.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a quick funny story. I was in college in Boston in 1977, and it was the Great Blizzard.
Yeah.
That happened in February 78. Everything was shut down for weeks. So me and my college friends were walking over the Mass Turnpike. And again, everything's shut down, and we're looking down at the highway over the bridge, the overpass, and being dumbass college, dumb, bleep that, dumb.
It's live stream. It's okay. It's okay.
Dumb knucklehead college students. We jumped into the highway of snow from the overpass. Yeah. So
would you do that now?
I actually was funny. I was talking. I said, you know what? I should reach out to them and say, on the 50th anniversary, we should reenact. But you guys go first, and I'll walk.
Right. Yeah.
So no, I am not a fan of the cold weather.
One of those moments too that when you were young, and foolish,
dumb.
you do that. But now you go, oh, no way would I do that. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on in the legislative session about
it's
the bond.
It is. It's kind of so. There's several bills that were filed. One of them, another constitutional amendment, was actually filed, and that's the one that we were trying to get passed last session. And that basically will give judges discretion, and that's a key word. And that's something that you and I, and even the judges here in Harris County, will say we need more discretion.
That's what they want.
Or hamstrung. The statute says we have to give a bond.
Right.
The only one we can't do is capital murder, and even that's not happening, but it's happening a lot more, I want to say, lately. So all this would do was give judges discretion not to grant bond to defendants charged with certain violent crimes, especially your repeat offenders that we see. So maybe this time, second time around, it'll pass. And
why do you think it didn't pass the last time?
There were a lot of political factors
at
play. You might remember that a lot of the Democrats, the majority of them, took off to D.C. So when they left, this bill was left languishing, and then it took months and months, and they just couldn't get enough traction. And because a constitutional amendment is different than a bill, and the reason being is to get a bill passed, it's a simple majority vote.
Right.
You get 59 votes and 58 are against it. 59 win, and that's it. But a constitutional amendment doesn't require a simple majority. It has to be 2/3.
Really?
Yeah. So it passed the Senate 27-2. Then it went over to the House, and it failed by 12 votes.
Now, could it ever be put on a ballot where
you got to get it voted out?
Yeah.
That's all this was. The bill basically would have allowed Texas voters
to decide.
And that's what I said. Texas voters would then be able to decide whether this was a good bill or a bad bill. Just like when you get all those amendments that you vote on, you're determining whether you're for this or against it. So the fact that Texas voters weren't even given that option last session was kind of disturbing to me, because I feel that they should have that choice.
Well, and one of the things through this whole thing that I've never really understood is why it has become such a political issue when it affects everybody. It doesn't matter what your political beliefs are. You could be a victim of someone that's free from jail on multiple bonds.
It's disturbing to me when I go around and I bring the poster boards of all the victims that we've documented on multiple felony bonds and PR bonds. The reality is a majority of the victims are classified as minority.
Yeah.
That's just a hard reality of them. None of them cared what political affiliation they were with. So I don't see any downside. It's not a mandate.
Right.
It's simply, the way I would give an analogy is we passed a bill to give the parole board more discretion.
Yes.
When they deny parole, it used to be sometimes they'd have up to 3 years.
Yeah.
Now, for most violent cases, they can go up to 5 years. In a capital case, they can go up to 10 years. It's their choice.
You're right.
So something like this, if a judge still wanted to grant a habitual repeat offender a bond, they could still do it.
Right.
But if something like this would pass, at least they would have that option or discretion to say, no more bond for you.
But they still, I keep going back to this, but while they have to, while the Constitution says everyone deserves a bond, it doesn't say in the Constitution that you get multiple bonds. You could have your bond revoked because you picked up a new criminal charge or you violated the conditions of your bond.
And I guess that's where things are, and that's why we do what we do, because you have a philosophical difference that's particularly going on in the Harris County judiciary as opposed to other entities that I talked to about this just isn't happening in their county. So you got a difference of how you handle repeat offenders. Some of the mindset, I don't know, maybe it'll change with some of the new judges. That's what's going to be. That's what's going to be interesting to see whether some of this is changing. And if you and I have discussed, we've seen changes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
particularly in the last year.
Yes.
And I just saw a guy get a $100,000 bond for a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before. Some of these are $1 million bonds that we've not seen before. So I am seeing a direct result over what we've been kind of putting out to the public.
Yeah, you've got judges now are saying, I mean, they're looking at these defendants and they're obviously concerned. They're concerned that they're going to be out committing more crimes, and they'll set a really high bond.
Right. But there's still, like I said, there's still ones that fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
And that's why we continue to look at what we do and continue to do these types of segments. The murders, thankfully, have reduced.
They have.
They've gone down dramatically. I went from like 58 in 2021 to maybe 28 in 2000. And that's a huge, significant drop.
Oh, sadly, there was a period of time where it seemed like it was almost an everyday occurrence or something. It happened a lot.
Well, if you think about it, you had 58 in 1 year, and how many weeks are in a year? We were, I mean, it was no problem for you and I to crank out someone on multiple bonds for murder.
Yeah, when you look at that year, probably the majority, definitely, of all the breaking bond segments dealt with a defendant who was out on multiple felony bonds that went on to allegedly kill someone. And one thing too, we've seen this, some of the people that we've reported on, some of the defendants, they've been convicted. They're now serving time for the murders that we told you about.
Yeah, so that's the other thing. I think we're going to see more people going to trial this upcoming year. And so you're going to see a lot of dispositions of these cases as well. So that's why I'm looking at a lot more different categories on violent offenders, because thankfully I'm not seeing what I had for the past 2 years. So that's a positive note. There's one bill that a legislator's filing. God, I appreciate it. They're addressing, and one of the reasons why the bill was filed, from what I was told, was because we did the story on the dollar bond guy.
Yeah.
When we did the story on a dollar bond guy, I mean, that thing went
crazy.
It went nationally, internationally. I mean, I was doing live at 3:30 in the morning, which is not a very pretty sight to begin with on that as well. But that thing really, and there was a lot of pushback from all the way up from the governor.
Yeah.
They were pretty startled that was happening. So as a result of that, you're seeing bills filed dealing with minimum mandates. So there's one in particular, it's House Bill 1728, and it's a new state rep out of the Humboldt Kingwood areas, Representative Cunningham. And so he's filing a bill. And yeah, I looked at it in my floor drop because he's looking. So if you're convicted of a capital offense, which is basically capital murder or aggravated sexual assault of a child, and they want to give you a bond, if this bill would pass, it would be $5 million.
Like automatic, that you
5
have
million.
to, it would have to start
Offense
at 5
involving,
million.
right, 5 million. Now, if it's, let's say, murder in the first degree, you remember the original bond for the guy that accused of murdering Takeoff, the rap?
Yeah.
All right, was originally what? Was it 2 million?
Yes, 2 million,
Was
and
2
then dropped
million,
to a
then
million,
dropped
I
a
think.
million on that. So that would actually mandate, this one would be 3 million minimum. So,
Wow.
so if you're thinking about doing something like this, and if this bill passes, you know, you're not going anywhere.
What is do you think that's a little extreme?
Yes.
Yeah.
Obviously. Yeah, obviously. But I get to, where they're coming from on
Right.
this. It's reactionary to the low stuff
Yes.
that we've seen on some of these cases. Is this extraordinarily? Obviously. But that's where you have room for negotiations on this. So I'm sure they probably said, let's put this out there, let's get a hearing, and then we can, talk it down to something a little bit more reasonable. So it's going to be interesting to see, if this bill does get a hearing, who's going to be up there.
I mean, there's going to be a lot of talk this legislative session about the whole bond issue, isn't it?
Well, we've seen it, coming from the governor's office. I've seen it coming from the lieutenant governor's office. We've seen, bail, minimum filed by Senator Whitmire and State Representative Johnson dealing with what we found out in Harris County when you weren't getting a minimum.
Yeah.
So,
and now I think that would be a good thing to have that statewide, because as you know, right now in Harris County, but even it's not really a law. What would you call it?
a policy.
A policy. Thank you. Because there's
policy.
It's really an honor system thing more than anything else, wouldn't you say?
It's an audit, and they're looking at it. So if something does happen, I think they can take action against the bonding.
Company. Yeah.
And again, keep in mind, there were very few of
Just
them.
yes, yeah.
I mean, I could count them on my one hand.
Right.
Maybe put another finger up there, and so it was rarely used, but it was used.
Yeah.
And as a direct result, the Harris County Commissioners Court took action, and
They did.
They responded.
And it was an issue because everybody thought that you had to come up with 10% of the bond amount, that was the way that it worked. But like you said,
this was the good thing about what happened to committee. This was a bipartisan support.
Yeah, you're right.
Everybody
Right.
was in support, from the county judge to every single county commissioner.
Yes.
Was supportive. So I'm kind of hoping when this goes statewide, it'll also get the same support. And again, I don't know if this has happened, but again, we didn't know it was happening here.
Right.
So
well, and it would, if it's not happening, it would prevent it from happening.
Again, I don't
else.
see any harm or downside to doing this.
Yeah.
So
you were supposed to go to Austin tomorrow, but you're not going to be going, right?
nope. In my new unofficial role as part of the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, we were actually supposed to have our first meetings in Austin, and so that was obviously because of the conditions there. So we'll be basically going to a Zoom meeting.
Now let's talk about that for a second, because there are people that want to say, okay, you're going to be up there just beating up the judges. I mean, how is this going to work?
I'm one of 13 members. There's 13 members that are appointed, and there's 5 that are appointed by the governor. And they're basically called public members. I'm not an attorney.
Right.
The rest of the members basically consists of judges, retired judges in a variety of different capacities, and also attorneys that are appointed by the state bar.
This is a way of having people that aren't in the judiciary to be part of it.
Representing, quote, the people of the state of Texas that are not actually working, as a lawyer or a judge in the position. So, you know, for those that think I'm coming up there, I'm going to put on some sort of Darth Vader mask and come in there going, vroom,
That sounds
vroom,
cool.
vroom. You know, I cynically laugh at that because, and there was this article that came out last week in some publication, and heck, it even featured some of the stuff that we do on this as well, and making all sorts of, you know, I'm the big bad wolf. I'm coming in and shaking things up on that. So I've worked as a victim advocate. What the story, of course, doesn't mention is that I worked under Democrat mayors.
That's right. Yeah.
I worked every single mayor when I was at City Hall.
Yeah.
Was a Democrat.
Lanier.
You're probably one of the few reporters that will remember that at the time, the judiciary was all Republican.
That's right.
And we pointed out things that were going on.
Yeah.
Back then, you had this unsatisfactory termination of probation, which we never heard of.
Right.
On that. We also had dual supervision.
Yeah.
People who were on parole and probation. So, you know, reading stories like that and going, you know, obviously you're not doing your homework, because if you were, you would know that I'm an equal opportunity offender.
Right.
It didn't matter.
Well, yeah, I'm glad. No, really, I'm glad you
Right.
brought that up, because, yeah, I mean, we were doing stories
Look at the parole
about.
board. The parole board's appointed by
Right.
what?
Yeah.
I mean, with the exception of when Ann Richards was the governor, ever since, you know, when George Bush came in as governor, every single governor has been a Republican, which means that every single parole board member that was appointed was appointed by a Republican governor.
Right.
And as you well know, we went at it quite a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no love lost at times between them. So again, I think if you looked at me on a total picture, notwithstanding what we've been doing for the last few years, anybody who would look at it on an objective level would recognize that I, as a victim advocate, it didn't matter.
Right.
What
Well,
you were.
like you were talking about the whole dual supervision and this unsatisfactory probation crazy thing. That was Republican judges.
Yes, they were.
And we were all over that.
I had some of them. It was interesting. It's a cute, funny story. It was a Crime Stoppers gala, and I went and I sat at one of the tables, and there was a judge. You know, obviously, it was a Republican judge, because that's all there was. We were sitting at the table, and I hadn't spoken to them in years, and she looks over and goes, "All right, Andy, I guess I must be doing something right, because I haven't heard from you in a few years." And all I could do was just smile and said, I guess that's good. So, you know, and, you know, when they say that, you know, well, he just started doing this when he came over here, quite frankly, because this wasn't happening.
Right.
It wasn't happening. Right. And the data, everything backs that up and support that this was not happening until prior to 2019.
Everything you and I have done in the last 3+ decades, it's all issue driven. It's not, I mean, now it's judges, because they're the ones that are doing this with the bonds, but it's always been issue driven. There for a while, it was the parole board that we kept calling on the carpet. I mean, it's an issue. It's not picking someone or some entity. It's the issue. It's following what the problem is.
It's never been based on political affiliation. It's really based on right and wrong. It never mattered to me. So, and you know, and I thought long and hard, if I allowed this certain entity to do what they were doing and not pointing out, then I always thought I would be just as guilty. And I'm not here to do. I get it. When you're an advocate like I am, you know, when you advocate on behalf of one faction, you will generally infuriate.
Yes.
And that just comes with the territory.
Right. Yeah. Well, you're not.
I can't please everybody. You're not
going to be everybody's cup of tea. And the way that I've always looked at that is, who would want to be? I mean, I wouldn't want everybody to agree with me or everybody to like me, or, I mean, it's nice when people say, hey, you know, I watch on TV and I like what you do, and I respect what you do. And I appreciate people that point that out, but there's a lot of people that Thank you so much. Raymond gets a raise. But there are some people that probably, when I come on, they probably turn the channel. You know, I mean, it's just, you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea.
And I go back, I refereed high school basketball for 28 years. 28 years I refereed and never missed a call. But that's another story. True story.
That's a miraculous thing there.
I know. I kept trying to get you guys to do a story on the ref who never missed a call. But for whatever reason, it's real simple. You ask me, no. But I use the same analogy refereeing a ball game as I do with this job. I blow the whistle and make a call. Half the crowd agrees, right?
Yep.
The other half's going to distisagree no matter what I call.
They're going to say you're stupid.
Right. I've been called over. So that's how I first learned I was losing my hair. I had no idea who they were talking about until my co-official said, talking about you. Oh, wow, man. I need to look in the mirror more. But it's the same thing. You make the call you think is right and you sell it and you move on. There was a really good line. There was a press conference with the former mayor, late Bob Lanier, when I was first doing this, and somebody was upset over something that I might have done. Imagine that. And there was one of the press conferences that the mayor had. Was a reporter asked Lanier about something that I had done that might have upset. It had to do with a death penalty case or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember Bob Lanier turned around at the press conference in his big booming voice, and he said, "Look, I don't expect Mr. Khan to please the criminal element."
Right.
That was one of the greatest lines. 30 years later, that line still resonates.
But it's true. I mean, what kind of crime victims advocate would you be if you were in Huntsville saying, let's abolish the death penalty? I mean, you know, it's like, that's not what you're about. That's not what you do.
No, so I expect, those, take umbrage, but I would think you would want to do it in some sort of a semblance of fairness and balance and look at the picture. So I'm probably a lot more fair than most people would probably think. And because when you think of some of the stuff that you and I've done, we very meticulously go over.
Yeah.
And there's some where we look at these cases and go, no.
Yeah.
That doesn't work no matter what the court might be. No, can't do that because that's not fair. So it doesn't matter, to me what court it is or what parole board member or whatever.
Well, when you look at pretty much every issue that we've tackled, it's all in some capacity document driven. It's based on some sort of documentation or something from a public records information request, something that's in black and white where it's not, it's just because I said so.
No, when you go back and look, when we first started noticing the mandatory releases on supervision, and we noticed this was a problem. I mean, you had some big time offenders that were committing some really bad murders, including serial killers that were scheduled to come out. And we took it on and we ended up changing state law.
I mean, it was like the first thing that
in the 90s,
that George W. Bush did as the governor of Texas.
Yep, that was actually part of his campaign.
Yes,
was to abolish mandatory release. So a lot of these things end up being a catalyst for change. And just like we're seeing on the bond issue, we've already seen the residual effects of that.
Yes.
We've seen a county policy. Now we've got, a state, we've seen Senate Bill 6 saying no more PR bonds.
Right.
So if we hadn't been doing these, bringing these things out, I don't think you would have state law making these changes.
Right.
As a result. So the fact that there have been changes made as a result of what we're doing tells me we're doing things.
And it's because people care. It's because people out there that are watching this and watch this segment, they want to see change. They care about the situation and they want to see change. That's what everybody, I think we can all agree that it's all based on changing a situation that it's not safe.
No, so if some people still want to be mean to me, and call me some sort of names or whatever. That's that's your prerogative.
You're mean to me and call me names all the time.
But I'll tell you one thing: nothing compares to when you're refereeing a ball game. So I've been called everything. You name it. I don't know, whatever you guys might want to think about me. Nothing compares.
I would say you have been called every name in the book, young man. Hey, thank you so much for watching.
What
Be
we got
sure-
tonight? We got a real
Yes.
doozy, right?
This is one of those that when you hear it, you're going to think that doesn't make sense, but it's a factual situation that we are delving into. A man who basically was out on what, 4
He
bonds?
was out on like in less than a year period, multiple bonds, all involving domestic violence, sexual assault, and different victims.
Yeah, there's
So-
like 4 or 5 women that this man has allegedly attacked. Some of the documentation is really, it's
Graphic.
disturbing. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
you can't
really
even-
is. And he's back behind bars now, but it took a while. We'll tell you all about it on tonight's Breaking Bond on the Fox 26 News at 9. Thank you so much for watching.
Stay
Take
safe.
care.
Yep.
Stay warm.